Hello and welcome to the second official webinar organized by the Affected Communities and Allies Working Group. The mission of the Affected Communities and Allies Working Group is to raise awareness about the legacy and the ongoing impact to frontline communities of the nuclear weapons industrial complex. We advocate for policy and action to assist survivors and affected communities impacted by the ongoing and intergenerational harms resulting from radioactive violence. My name is Oshana Shee, and I live and work here on Tiwa lands in Albuquerque, New Mexico with the Nuclear Issues Study Group. And we work to dismantle what we call the nuclear beast, which we're going to be learning more about here this evening. So the title of our webinar this evening is Nuclear is Not a Climate Solution: The Devastating Impacts of the Pacific Nuclear Testing, the Fukushima Nuclear Disaster, and Radioactive Waste from US Nuclear Reactors. March 11th marks the 11th anniversary of the tsunami and disaster at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant in Japan. Tonight, we will be hearing from those who were directly impacted by this disaster and their calls for justice 11 years later. We will also hear from Mari Inoue, who is an attorney and an activist with the Manhattan Project for a Nuclear-Free World, about the ongoing crisis in Japan, where tens of thousands of people are still displaced 11 years later. We will also hear from Ayami Nakanishi, who was 11 years old living in Japan at the time of the disaster, and she will share about the rise of thyroid cancer among children. Thyroid cancer is one of the known adverse effects of radiation exposure. In 2021, the Japanese government decided to dump 1.28 million metric tons of radioactive wastewater from the damaged nuclear power plant into the Pacific Ocean beginning in 2023. This radioactive wastewater directly impacts communities in the Pacific Islands. So we will also hear from Betty Rathule and Claire Bartolome, who will speak to the impacts of both nuclear testing and nuclear dumping on communities in Fiji. So we have global voices, folks from around the world, joining us on this webinar. We're really excited for all of you who have joined us for this program this evening. And finally, we're going to hear from Dr. Arjun Makhjani about the health impacts of nuclear energy. So taken together, this program will clearly explain why nuclear energy is not a climate solution. And it will shed light on the underreported impacts of ongoing nuclear crises in communities impacted by nuclear testing, nuclear energy, and radioactive waste. Right now, with the twin threats of nuclear war and climate change more pressing than ever, it has never been more important to abolish nuclear weapons and nuclear energy. So again, thank you all for joining us. We're really happy to bring you this event free of charge, of course, but we strongly encourage those of you watching to make donations to the Minano data site, which translates to everyone's data site. MDS is a Japanese grassroots nonprofit network of citizens' radioactivity measurement that was created in the wake of the nuclear disaster in Fukushima. And we will have a link in the chat to MDS. We highly encourage folks to make donations. So again, welcome to all of you wherever you're joining from. We're happy that you're here joining us on this webinar. And without further ado, I'm going to begin the program straight away. I'm going to share my screen here. So I want to start with this graphic, which is a graphic that I often use in my teaching. And for those of you perhaps who nuclear issues are new, this is a very helpful graphic, and it was created by the Radiation Monitoring Project, which is a fantastic organization. I encourage you to check out radmonitoring.org to learn more about their work. They work to put radiation monitors and Geiger counters into the hands of frontline impacted communities. So this graphic depicts what it means to produce nuclear energy and also to pursue nuclear weapons technology. So anything nuclear begins with uranium, and it's a step-by-step process that is known as the nuclear fuel chain. So uranium can be mined in open pits. It's considered, that's considered conventional mining, or it can also be mined through in situ leach mining, which is similar to fracking. And as you can see, each step of the nuclear fuel chain creates radioactive and hazardous waste. And this is waste that has to be safely isolated from human beings and the environment for hundreds of thousands of years. And we as human beings, we have not figured out a way to do this successfully. There really isn't an agreed upon way to safely isolate nuclear waste for hundreds of thousands of years. So each stage of the nuclear fuel chain creates this waste. And as you can see, from mining to milling, conversion, enrichment, all the way down to the nuclear power plant itself, there is waste that is created. And I love sharing this quote from Michael Keegan, who works with the Coalition for Nuclear Free Great Lakes. He describes the process of specifically nuclear energy production this way. He says, electricity is but the fleeting byproduct from nuclear reactors. The actual product is forever deadly radioactive waste. So this is kind of the first reason that I want to lay out for folks about why nuclear is not the solution for climate change, because this waste that is created along the way throughout the process is incredibly dangerous. It's incredibly radioactive, and it's primarily communities of color and indigenous communities that are impacted by this waste. Here in New Mexico, we have the designation of having almost every aspect, if I go back to that slide, of this nuclear fuel chain in our state. So we have almost every aspect of this process, and it's left a deadly legacy, again, primarily impacting indigenous communities. The one aspect that we don't have here in New Mexico, we don't have a commercial nuclear power plant. And this is relevant because there is a plan right now to bring irradiated spent nuclear fuel from nuclear power plants from around the country. So there's about 100 sites, as you can see in these red spots on the map, primarily on the coast and some in the Midwest. So all that waste, currently the plan is to bring it on rails and barges to two sites, one in New Mexico and one in Texas, just across the border from one another. And so this would be called centralized interim storage, meaning it would be temporary. And here in New Mexico and with the Nuclear Issues Study Group, we see this as incredibly risky, incredibly dangerous. It's something that's never been done before at this volume and in this way. And we also really clearly name this as a form of environmental racism, because the communities that live immediately around these two sites are predominantly communities of color. And again, New Mexico did not receive the benefits, quote unquote, of nuclear power, yet would receive all of this waste. If you'd like to learn more about this particular issue, we will have a link in the chat to a number of groups that work on this issue.